Hi, I'm Michael Hartman.
I'm Naomi Liu.
And I'm Mike Rizzo. And this is OpsCast,
a podcast for marketing ops pros
and RevOps pros.
Created by the Mo Pros, the #1 community for marketing operations professionals.
Tune in to each episode as we chat with real professionals to help elevate you in your marketing operations career.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of OpsCast, brought to you by marketingops.com, powered by all the Mo Pros out there. I'm your host, Michael Hartman, flying solo today. I'm sure Mike and Naomi will join again soon. Joining me today is Brendan Burke, and he and I are going to talk about creating a culture of experimentation. Brendan is currently Senior Marketing and Growth Manager at Baydin/Boomerang. Maybe he can explain what the difference is there. Prior to joining Boomerang, Brendan did digital marketing and strategy in the world of politics, including working on campaigns. Brendan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So I think I called it out there. Baydin, Boomerang. What's the difference there?
Baydin is the legal name of the company. Boomerang is the product. Yeah, Boomerang is the product. So it's email productivity and calendar tools. Kind of old for a startup. Founded in 2010. So I've been around a little while, but still going strong.
Okay. Well, I did like the 2-second version of your career. Anything else you want to fill in? Or, I think if I remember right, unless something's changed since we last talked, you're the only marketing person at the company too. What's that like?
I am, yeah. I guess a little bit of color on how I got started. It was kind of inauspicious. I was working I was working for a member of Congress, and they were having trouble hiring a digital communications director. And someone brought up in one of the hiring meetings that I had like a funny Snapchat. And so that has led to me getting the job. So I don't know what that says about, technology and politics. But I don't even know what Snapchat is. My kids give me a hard time. They're like, "Oh, you're with the old person. You're still using Facebook, Dad." Yeah. So it's a real career path. To tools that are just silly can become career opportunities before you know it. But now I work in tech, and I work specifically for a productivity company at the same time that the current Congress is historically like unproductive. I've been reading stories about like they've passed like the fewest bills in like 100 years or something. So I don't know. I'd like to say that they all should use Boomerang for email productivity, but I don't know that would solve all the political problems in Washington with one app. All right.
I was a little bit worried we might have to wander into the politics realm, so I think I'm going to steer away from that because I do not see any upside of that conversation on this podcast. Happy to chat with you offline, but maybe not for our audience.
Sure, that's a separate podcast.
Yeah, there's lots of podcasts that would be a totally normal and expected topic. All right. So when we first talked, you did say that your company has a culture of experimentation, which I thought was interesting because I think a lot of companies say they do, but in my experience, most don't really. And then, in fact, the company's referring to 2024 as the year of experiment. So walk us through that and what it means and maybe a little bit of the background about how that came about.
Yeah. Well, the company having that culture, and I'm coming up on 3 years now at Boomerang, but they have basically been bootstrapped over more than a decade, and so just making the most with what they had has really been the culture of the company, and that means investigating what is working and promoting that and cutting what isn't working in terms of tactics and things like that. So it's not that there was an experimentation framework at the company really until this year, but it was definitely part of the culture that was going to make data driven decisions and make sure the results are measured and go with what's working. But when this year came around, it was really just a conversation between two of our co-founders, who happened to be husband and wife, Mo and Alex, and they were talking about the strategic direction for this year. And I guess it was just, what if we do, what if we set a goal for experiments? And originally it was 26 experiments. They rolled that out at our, we call it a workaway. We're fully remote. So we were actually all together in person at the beginning of this year, and said, we're going to set a goal of 26 experiments. And that was quickly doubled to 52.
It's crazy.
For the full
one a
year.
week.
Yeah. And we can get into that pace. But that's kind of the beginning of it, was just, this is something that we try to do more of on an ad hoc basis. We know it's been part of our success. What if we lean into that and set an outcome goal of 26 of these and see where that leads us?
So a couple of one, a comment and then a follow-up question on this. So one, I was like, you mentioned early on what you were describing is that the company is willing to cut things that aren't working or stop things that are not working. And I think just my commentary there is like, I think that's actually highly unusual, even though I don't think it should be. Right? There's a lot of, I've seen many places where you get into this fallacy where we sunk X amount of money and time and effort into something. We just a little bit more, and I'm sure it'll work, right? When in fact, it's just throwing good money at bad stuff. And I so applaud that. Just to be clear, like this is a company-wide thing. This is not just a marketing thing or a sales thing or a development thing, right? Product thing. Is that right? Is full company?
That's right. It's definitely cross-functional. There ended up being sort of a core group of us who are working on it regularly, but it's touching, many parts of the company. It's not just within marketing. It's not just within product. And it's definitely a collaborative effort that's involving people, across the company from all those departments.
Gotcha. So how many people are with the company right now?
Yeah, I say across the whole company. There's 18 of us right now. So,
18.
Yeah.
But there's a subset of that whatever. So I'm going to guess maybe you could, or I don't want to guess. How many are on that core team?
I'd say there's 6 or 7 of us. It's mostly, It's marketing, it's product, it's design, it's the leadership of the developers, it's the co-founders. So. Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm going to not count the co-founders, right? So it's not a huge amount, but it's also not, given your overall size, right? It's pretty significant investment.
Sure.
To have that many people.
Definitely.
With, one could argue that it's extra work that doesn't align with your core goals, right? Probably as a marketer or product or whatever. But, so I think that's really interesting. So what kind of impacts have you seen from the experience that you've done? You can keep it to marketing if you want, or overall, or both.
Well, I think our win rate in terms of experiments that succeed is like slightly over 50%. So that's
win rate meaning we set a goal and we achieved the goal, or win rate that. What do you mean by win rate? Just I guess
like A/B test if the new variant that we're trying to introduce is beating the status quo, the control variant.
Okay.
Making an improvement on what existed before.
Okay.
Is like over 50%. And then we did a sort of back of the envelope, tabulation earlier this year, and it was about 500,000 in new ARR on top of our about 8 million ARR. So not insignificant in terms of a growth on top of the company's existing revenue. And so those results, as well as kind of the pace that we set out on back in January, February, back in Q1, those were sort of the driving forces behind doubling the goal, which we're still on track to make. We're going to come in at like 52 or 53 experiments run for the whole year.
Amazing.
Hey everyone, Mike Rizzo here, CEO of MarketingOps.com and co-host of OpsCast. I've got a little secret to share with you, something that's been one of the best kept perks of our community until now. At MarketingOps.com, we've built a hiring program that's changing the game for marketing operations recruitment, and we're finally sharing it with the world. Our community is over 22,000 strong, and within that, we have over 4,400 members who are actively and passively seeking new opportunities. These are seasoned professionals with skills and experience spanning platforms like HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, and so much more. Plus, we can help you fine-tune your outreach, targeting exactly the right candidates by region, years of experience, seniority level, or even agency experience. But here's the real cherry on top. When you hire through our program, your new team member gets a free membership or a virtual ticket to our annual conference. From day one, they're not just stepping into a new role, they're getting access to the training, networking, and support they need to hit the ground running. So if you're ready to unlock this incredible opportunity, it's time to let this secret out. Visit marketingops.com and find your next star teammate today. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep optimizing.
Well, so you said you did a back of the envelope one. Like, how did you just project what the baseline or the incumbent model was, what you projected that would be in terms of ARR, and then just new projection based on the change, and that's how you came up with the incremental ARR number?
Yeah, and for some of these, that's more concrete than others.
Sure,
like I said, it's across product marketing, whatever. And so some of these are like, literally tweaks to like our purchase flow. Others are much more top of funnel, like changing a landing page or landing page template. So the proximity to revenue varies, but that's the top line impact or the bottom line impact that we arrived at. And it is it's a product led company. That's how they grew the company. Now it's becoming more of a mix of like B2B, but historically the user base and the customer base have been sort of the prosumer customers. So
gotcha.
That product-led motion is really ripe for this type of experimentation.
Sure. I hadn't heard that term prosumer, but it's a good one. I like that. Is it a common one? Am I just out of it like I am with TikTok and, it's whatever?
I don't think it's like TikTok. I don't know. There's probably a corner of TikTok dedicated to prosumer. I'm not on TikTok, but it's people who are purchasing for themselves, but it's not TikTok. It's not a hobby. It's people who may be independent contractors or freelancers, or they may work for a company, but they're buying it for themselves in their own use.
Buying for themselves, but for their professional, mostly for their professional life. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I know you said that this got kicked off at the beginning of 24 at I'll call it your all hands kind of meeting. What was there something that was the catalyst or something that prompted this, and then how did you go about even coming up with? And maybe you didn't start with 26, right? Initial experiments, but where did the experiments come from?
Yeah, I think we actually started with a whole lot more. I think we started with a list of over 90 ideas. And the way that was generated, that was one of the most collaborative parts of it, was like an all hands brainstorm at our all hands meeting. So when they announced that this was going to be part of our focus for the 2024, everyone was encouraged at that outset to contribute ideas for things that, they saw that could be improved, that could be tested, questions that they had. And that led to this huge list of like over 90 experiments or, places that we could look at to make an improvement.
So, sorry to interrupt again, but so 90, was it like after, I assume some people had similar ideas or duplicates?
Yeah,
so it's 90 unique? Okay.
Yeah. So then after we returned home from that get together, a smaller group looked and consolidated the list, and then from there prioritized the list. And the CEO was the decision. Our CEO Mo was the decision maker on, which ones we were going to select for execution.
Just did you have some sort of model or thought? Like, what was the thought process on how you prioritized those ideas? Because 90 is a lot, even after consolidating. Let's say it's half of that. 45 is a lot.
Yes. We used they used the RICE framework, which I think comes from product management, which is, let me see if I can remember them all now. It's an acronym. Reversibility. I know C is confidence. E is effort. The I is escaping me.
I'm looking it up right now. All right. So let's see. R is reach, impact, confidence, effort. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we add an R there for reversibility because whether it's a permanent change or
right.
something that can actually, if it fails, can be reversed. So we use RICER. So reach, impact,
Ricer
effort.
That's not make me think of mashed potatoes. Sorry.
So that we actually omitted the C there though, because normally you're making a guess on confidence.
Yeah.
But in this case, the point of the experiment was to get that confidence and really just get more certainty. I guess C could be for certainty, but it's not something that we use as part of the framework. And so each one was scored, and then that led to the list that we started with.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like I've heard this RICE model before. I've used similar things. It's interesting because it's too bad Mike's not here, because he would probably jump right in and say, like, this is again another example of like a product management kind of framework that would work well for marketing ops folks. So he's a big believer that marketing ops is kind of like more aligned with product management than I tend to think. Although I'm coming around.
Big of you to admit that, even when he's not here to stand up for it.
That's all right. I'm totally comfortable admitting when I'm wrong, because it happens too often not to be. So I do think like the C one, if it's confidence and the ability to actually deliver, execute on whatever the experiment is or the idea is, that to me, that's an important one, right? I think, if you didn't use it in yours, I think that's fine too, right? I think the idea is you've got something that you're using that's trying to take some of the bias out of the prioritization. That is more than one person's opinion, I think, which is often how these things happen. And sometimes you even have a framework, and then, person with the highest title gets to decide anyway. So it's like, why do you do it? Mostly at bigger companies, I think. But
that's what I think is really helpful about this process, and why I think it can be really beneficial to approach running, even if you're not going to do a year of experiments, like to run things this way, because it does take that bias out of which direction you're going to go in.
Right.
And it, the best idea wins, and, ideas that aren't working, you don't need to argue about whether it's going to be effective or not, because you can just measure it. And so as long as people are willing to accept what the results are, it can take a lot of whatever politics or whatever out of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just curious. So I'm assuming that 90 or whatever got whittled down to at the beginning, there's been additional ones added over time. So do you do are you doing a regular review, applying that rice model with the list as it stands after you've tried some, so they're no longer on the list, or added ones that weren't originally on the list?
Yeah, we did a refresh. So there's been about really just one refresh as far as a comprehensive look at what we've done. That was around August. Because you're right, we definitely come up with more ideas as we have done them. And as we get results, it's really helpful, we've learned, to kind of keep pushing in the same area. For example, when new users sign up, they're on a trial of our product.
Sure. And
we found some success changing our messaging and our communications at the end of the 30-day trial. And I think we did 3 or 4 iterations, and they kept being successful ones. So it kind of revealed for us that was a higher leverage moment in the user journey. And we just wanted to keep iterating it, a little bit better and better. And I think that's kind of been key as you do these and you get the results. Sometimes they're the thing that you're testing, the area of the website, visitor journey, user journey that you're focusing on is just a high leverage spot. And so it's worth it to keep iterating in the same area, even if you get, a win or 2 wins. It can really make a big impact if you keep going.
Sure. You get kind of a little bit of a multiplier effect. So, doing one of these every 2 weeks, I think, would be massive for most of the people who are listening to this. And you're now at a pace of 1 a week. In terms of how are you how are you managing that whole effort, and how are you able to move that quickly?
We're really fortunate that this came from the top down, because it meant that everything was resourced. We have developers who are able to work on these for us, build these for us. It's prioritized in our company. And, that's key to anyone who wants to do something like this, is to get that buy-in from the top, to make sure that there's going to be the resources for it. I think one thing that sort of quickly became apparent, though, was you can only do one test at a time on one thing. If you have this landing page, you're like, oh, I want to convert more people on this landing page. Well, you can probably only run one A/B test at a time, and that might take a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to do something in those 2-3 weeks, then you can look at other areas of other parts of the surface area to run a different test on. And so that's kind of how we're able to do so many over the course of a year. Is there's a lot of different places, from lifecycle email, website, landing pages, in product user activation stuff. There's a lot of different places that you can be running these on, sometimes simultaneously. Okay. And so, once you get started, there's really no end to what you can do.
Sure. Are you just tracking all this stuff in a spreadsheet, or how's this?
Yeah, sorry. So tactically, it started with a spreadsheet. We moved to Trello. So we have
I'm sorry.
Okay. Any kind of Kanban, we find the Kanban most helpful, because it shows we have statuses for each of our columns are statuses, so you can see what's active, what's being built, and then we also have a couple automations. So if we know it's probably going to take
3 weeks to get enough data for one of them, something will automatically move into a column where it tells us it's time to decide. So yeah, each experiment, each A/B test is its own card in Trello. And that way we can comment on it in that place. We use other tools to actually do maybe if there's development work required, that's, going to go into our ticketing system. But as far as managing the experiments themselves, it's Trello. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm only sort of serious about Trello. I'm not a huge fan of Trello. I know plenty of people like it. So it's hard for me to bite my tongue sometimes. So
there are worse tools, I think.
Basecamp comes to mind, but
I haven't had the pleasure.
You're not missing much. So, okay, so I think we actually have talked to somebody about this. We've had a couple of people on recently who I would say came out of a science background, right? So familiar with the scientific method, which is, should be a highly structured approach, right? You develop a hypothesis and then you develop a test, you run the test, evaluate the results. Does your hypothesis hold? So, and for anyone who's a scientist out there, if I butchered that a little bit or missed it by a little bit, please don't come get me. I think I'm close enough. But do you have a structured process like that? And how long, you mentioned some of these happen simultaneously or overlap, I assume, what does that process look like for any given experiment so that you can, I guess, ultimately you want to know at the end, did it work or not? And what was the impact? Right.
Yeah. I hope that your brief outline there was accurate, because that basically, the framework that we use is, start with the hypothesis. And this is a lesson that we learned is it has to be one sentence long. It has to be just really clear. What's the change you're making and what do you hope that it will do? So we do have that at the top of each Trello card is the hypothesis for this experiment. And then,
okay. I like that.
Yeah. Another lesson that we learned is you have to identify which number you're going to use to evaluate success and whether it should go up or down. Because it's surprising how, weeks go by and then you're like, wait a second, what exactly was this intended to do?
Right.
Because, you might be able to see, other effects, but you need to be able to identify, what does success look like and should it make the number go up or go down? And then, some of the things that are standard for all of our experiments are that hypothesis, the success criteria, the instrumentation for how we'll actually measure the results. This is another area that we have had to improve on because there is some communication breakdown. Basically, we've been good at saying, okay, this screen looks like this. We want to make it look like this other thing as part of this test. That part of the communication has been very straightforward. The part that we've had to improve a bit when we got started was how are we going to measure whether the first screen or the second screen, converts more, whatever result we're looking for. Because
sorry, I've got this. I know I've got this weird look on my face. Do you mean the mechanism by which you'll measure it?
Exactly, the mechanism.
Okay.
Because we don't have an optimization platform. We're not using a third party to do this.
Right.
Our developers are setting up. In many cases, it's like Google Analytics events, and so as they're building it, being very specific about what are you going to name it, what is that action that you're measuring, and where can I find it.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry.
No, that's a fair question. Yeah. Because at the beginning of this year, I think if someone had told me you have to run a year of experiments, it's like, okay, well, what platform are we going to use would probably be my first question. And, we've done it without that. So, I don't know, maybe we could do 104 with a platform or something.
Sure.
But no, so instrumentation is a key part that we've learned needs a lot of focus and very explicit communication as an experiment moves from team to team. And then also guardrails. So there's the number that we want to see go up or down as an indicator of success. But, it's like sending an email. Yeah, you want clicks on that email, but you might also want to keep an eye on people who unsubscribe to see if the net effect is more harmful than is actually going to be helpful.
Right.
So for each one, just as a thought exercise, like what is the guardrail that we want to prevent? I think email unsubscribes is kind of the clearest thing there.
Well, I can imagine though. Let's say you say we've defined this is the metric we want to increase, but let's say you run the experiment, it starts to decrease. I assume you also have a floor, right? It says this is where the reversibility comes in. We're gonna undo that experiment before it has a truly negative impact on the business. Is that what you're describing? Okay.
Yeah, if you even if you estimate it's going to take 4 weeks to get enough data to know whether we succeeded here, within 5 days or so of it launching, we want to just check on those results and make sure that there's nothing totally crazy happening, so that we don't wait for 4 weeks to find out that we got a bad result.
It's really interesting. Anything else as part of that sort of structured process that's important?
Those are the key parts. So there's one person who owns each experiment, and then, for example, if it's in the marketing domain, that would typically fall to me, and I'm going to write all this up, and then I'm going to send it to our CEO, who's the sort of decision maker, make sure that I've covered all my bases with the plan, and then it will move on to a designer if necessary, for the design, and then onto our developers, and then we will line it up to be launched.
It was as you were describing this, what was popping into my head a little bit is, this came up recently and with people I've been talking to, because it's that time of year, right? Goal setting is the idea of, have you ever heard of SMART goal setting, SMART, right? And the what you described is having like the one sentence description of what you're doing with the desired outcome, and then the measurement or metrics behind it, right? Those basically are the first two letters in the SMART, right? Specific and measurable. And I think a lot of people miss that in how they do goal setting, and probably would miss it in the context of doing experiments too. Yeah.
The measurement I think can be intimidating, but it's really key.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you don't know, this is where I've struggled with people who've come to me as a marketing ops leader and say, oh, we want to do an A/B test. And when they describe it, I'm like, that's not really an A/B test. It's like two completely different scenarios, right? Because you're not really testing one small, I wouldn't even call it multivariate, right? It's like, we're going to do two completely different landing pages and see which one, quote, wins. But then they don't really do the test of the wins. They run the whole campaign, and then they may or may not take the insights from that campaign and apply it to a future campaign, right? Which is not really an A/B test. I'm not saying you can't learn from it, but it's not really what an A/B test is.
Yeah, I think this is how I end up, aligning more with marketing operations and not something else within marketing, is because, I can get energized by the creative process, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be disappointed if I don't know the impact or results of the thing that I did. And I think that's one thing that sets marketing operations apart. But the repeatability that you mentioned is another, it's another thing that's, I think, tricky because, case in point, like we actually have sort of two products. We have Boomerang for Gmail and Boomerang for Outlook. that people can use with either of those email accounts. And that's been one of the surprising things is we'll take a result from, our Gmail user base and try to do the same thing with our Outlook product. And the results are not repeatable, to our surprise and dismay. And
I was sitting there smiling as you were starting because I was like, I'm pretty sure I know where this is going. Because I'm working right now where I've got on one side a client or an employer that I've worked for that had Outlook, but I use Gmail as on personal stuff, and they operate differently enough where like I can imagine that how you would use a product like yours would also vary.
Yeah. The way the product works, the people who use them, I wish I knew why, all the reasons for the differences.
No, that's interesting. But I mean, I think this is interesting, right? I mean, this is, so my first exposure to do it, like being able to do something like this was when I basically was leading the charge on doing paid search marketing for a big company. This was back in the early days when paid search was still relatively new. But I remember, and I still see this, like people agonizing over the copy you put into a paid search ad, right? What's your headline going to be? What's the words you're going to use? And I remember one time I was like, I can't remember what the specific scenario was. And this was for something like really like specific. It was for semiconductors. So it was like not a consumer product by any means. Although we did have a challenge with audio semiconductors being confused with search terms that were for people who are audiophiles, but that's a whole other part of it. But one of the things I remember one time my friend was like, look, we're debating on this one word in this line of copy of like, there's like the relative cost for us to just try both and see which one works. Cause we think that we think they're synonyms. And, but the reality is one ended up, and then we're all like, everybody had an opinion. I had an opinion about which one would perform better once we did this. And I was wrong. And so it was like the first time when I was like, oh, we don't need to agonize over this if we've got something that we can move quickly on. Right.
Yep.
And also I was like, I may have my opinion about what's going to work. It was like one of those, I was like, I need to be ready to admit when I was wrong, because at the end of the day, if I let my ego get tied up in, whether or not my choice of, in this case, copy was right or better or whatever, and it's not, I'm going to be I'm going to go down a path where I'm going to sub-optimize what we're going to get to. So I was like, it was really, really important for me to get that. I love the idea that we could get that quick feedback and stuff, but it was like, so are you running into surprises too? I mean, you mentioned that one, right? Are there other examples of things where you did an experiment, you thought something was going to work or did not work, and then you saw the opposite or something different, maybe totally?
Yes, definitely. And that's a great case in point. And I think like what you mentioned about, agonizing about the right decision here or the right, word to use is like something that I've noticed in myself as I've, gone on in my career is like, it's not that I'm indifferent or don't care anymore about, the choices that are made, but I know that I might be wrong. I've had that happen to me enough where I don't want to get too wrapped up in thinking that one way or another is the right answer, even if I do have an opinion, because I just want to get it out into the world and see what happens. Another example of, I want to be glib and say another example of where, the user was wrong.
Right. Those pesky customers.
Right. But no, the customer is always right as the data informed us. We tried to redesign some pages in our purchase flow that used an older we would say, outdated form of our branding. And we could not, for the life of us, improve the conversion rate in some steps of the purchase flow, basically, that we, subjectively thought was going to be an improvement on the design. And I think objectively, like following design principles, actually, like would have considered it a more intuitive, higher converting example of like a purchase page design. But the numbers, I guess the numbers didn't lie. And so there's some compromises that you have to make there.
Right.
But yeah, I think those are some of the most interesting examples. And just really the ones that reinforce why it's important to, or, why it's helpful to test everything as time and resources allow.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that I try to tell leaders that often, especially at bigger organizations, when I've led marketing ops, where they're supporting all the go-to-market activity, some of that includes content, whether it's emails, landing pages, web content, et cetera, is this, you get this never-ending or really extended review and approval process, right? And what I have tried to do is educate the rest of those teams about, not, again, to your point, like, it's not that I'm not discounting the importance of caring about the work to a point. And really I try to tell them, like, you need to think about if something is either wrong or not right, like suboptimal, right? I don't even know there's right or wrong, right? There's always trade-offs in these things. Is consider how easy is it to change it or fix it should you realize that something has gone wrong. And if you think about it that way, you want to invest a little more time and effort on email, because once it's gone, right? Especially if it's an email that has important dates or times, like invitations to a webinar or a event that you're having, something like that. And know that you're going to miss stuff, because it always happens. No, but if you're doing like we're putting up a landing page, right? Well, you can fix a landing page like that, right? It's seconds theoretically. So should you just publish whatever, right? No, but I'm like, the level of review and approval should be aligned with the risk associated with something going out. Again, now if you have content that's wrong or misleading or whatever, right, you should fix it, and that needs to be fixed. And if you have to do some sort of communication, then do it. But otherwise, like, don't get so caught up in this. And that's what I'm like. The other one that's interesting to me. So again, going back to the search marketing stuff, it's been amazing to me how many times people get caught up in the grammatically correct copy for ads, especially on search ads, when what you find is actually misspellings sometimes do better because people don't know how to spell, or they're typing fast and they misspell. It is astounding to me. And like, people don't really read this stuff. And so I'm like, try a misspelling, like intentionally put a misspelling in there, see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned email as an area where you want to get more right. I don't disagree, but some of the best emails in terms of like open rate, subject line is like, oops.
Yeah.
Like, we sent a mistake.
Yeah, no, it's great. People, it's kind of, I suspect some of that is like, people can't, it's why traffic always slows at an accident, right? People, they want to see what the train wreck was that you did.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Human psychology is a whole other thing.
Not something you can repeat every week, but
no, right. Yeah. I mean, okay. So we're kind of ready. This has been fun. I think I want to hit a couple other things real quick before we have to wrap up. But the one in particular, like you mentioned that this is a cross-functional thing and there's other teams. Do you feel like, and I know you're a small organization anyway, but do you feel like this is like this culture of experimentation, this year of experimentation, has fostered more and better ability to collaborate across those functional, what is often divides. I don't even want to use the word, but that's what it is. I think for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say divide, especially because we are remote. And I would 100% agree with that. In the past, for me to be working with developers or something, like, if we have a new feature or a feature update, those would be much more effort intensive projects that would be on the scale of like weeks and months and not days. And so being able to increase that cadence of collaboration through these experiments, small changes like tweaking landing pages, things like that, has definitely allowed for more collaboration, just better better working relationships,
improved communication between these teams, you think?
Yeah, knowing what's important to communicate cross-functionally.
Yeah.
Just knowing what things they need to do their work and what things, letting them know what things I need to do my work. Those kinds of process things.
Yeah.
It's an iterative, it provides opportunity for a lot more iteration when you're doing a lot of small changes rather than these, a few big changes each year.
Right. Yeah, and I would expect in your case, like if you were, you'd be sort of at the receiving end of, we're launching this new significant change to our product line, go start to market it. Right now, you're like playing catch up as opposed to like being a part of that process.
Sure. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay, so one last question, and then we'll have to wrap up. What's the most painful lesson you've learned from this? Like, what is like? Yeah, it sounds like a lot of positives. Like, have there been like, what's the biggest challenge you've run into as part of this?
The biggest challenge, I do think that example about a design that everyone in the room agrees is better, quote unquote, better than the thing you're trying to improve upon, but does not convert as many customers. It's interesting to observe that, the strategic decision that has to be made there about whether you're going to go with something that might seem more aesthetically pleasing, but, however small the difference is, could hurt the business.
Sure.
And, this company, it's 3 co-founders, bootstrapped for over a decade now, profitably. I think that their success is, enough evidence that, you've got to be able to make those decisions. Back to one of our earlier points about, letting things go is like, a rebrand might look nicer, but if it's going to harm the business, is that really the right thing to do?
Yeah.
That's, sort of been a learning experience for me coming from, the marketing side of things, where you want every I to be dotted and T to be crossed, and, have everything sort of picture perfect. It's it's not easy to.
No, I mean, so this is, I come back to this all the time, is that the world is full of trade-offs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the business world is no different. And I mean, essentially what you described is a way of sort of forcing that trade-off discussion to happen.
Mm-hmm.
In a positive way. So
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I wish more teams did stuff like this. So Brendan, thank you for sharing what you've done, what you learned. I'm sure that our listeners have probably taken away some ideas that they can take and try to bring back to their organizations. If folks want to, learn more about what you're doing or reach out to you or whatever, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's just searching Brendan Burke Boomerang. And I do have shareable versions of our templates if anyone's interested in trying to see some of this for themselves. You could email me, brendanb@baydin.com, BRENDANB@BAYDIN.com.
Got it. Perfect. We didn't even get a chance to talk about the templates. So I knew we could have talked for longer. Well, again, Brendan, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to all of our listeners out there for continuing to support us. As always, if you have ideas or feedback on topics or guests or want to be a guest, feel free to reach out to Naomi, Mike, or me, and we would be happy to talk to you about that. Until next time, bye, everybody.